So it's time for another edition of our Wednesday feature where we focus on the more unconventional side of the law. It's called So Now What? And we're joined once again by our expert lawyer and friend in all things legal, Director at Legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern. Good to have you back with us, sir.
Great to be here.
So today the question is, I'm being watched at work, so now what? Okay, we'll be focusing on what your legal rights and recourses are when it comes to the measures of surveillance that are allowed in the workplace. A very, very interesting topic indeed, right?
I mean, you guys are really being surveyed in the workplace, more so
all the time, I think.
By the entire nation.
There's a lot of watching of us going on over here, but we completely understand an employer's motive to apply means of surveillance. You know, they've got, most of them will have very valuable assets that they want to protect and keep an eye on. But what other means and reasons would an employer want to keep an eye on people?
Okay, so for the most part, it's going to really be security. So, you know, an employer might put cameras up around, say, a factory or an office for security reasons to keep things safe. It's not there to, like, watch people to make sure if they're working, but it's to keep things safe. And it can be a really good idea if an employer needs to have evidence of something going on in an office or to protect to protect whatever assets they have in the office. So that's generally going to be the reason that there's surveillance in a workplace.
Yeah. Let's discuss the legal means
Sure.
with which an employer can survey the workspace, right? So cameras are the obvious one,
Yeah.
CCTV footage
Yes.
there. What other legal means are there and are allowed?
So it's really important for everyone to remember, when you're at your work, pretty much everything that you use, and when we talk about electronic devices, it's the company property, and the company's allowed to survey it. So if you're on a company phone, if you're on a company computer, technically, if you're on a company Wi-Fi system, the company is allowed to survey what's going on. So you really don't have... What you've got to remember about the right to privacy is it's not an absolute right. We don't always have the right to privacy. So when you're using workplace digital assets, phones and computers, you have quite a low expectation of privacy. So you really have to be wary.
So under which instances would an employer be allowed to legally use the information found from such surveillance?
Sure.
So if they've got a camera around and it's recording the entire time, when would they be legally allowed and able to use that footage?
Okay, so the answer to that is pretty much any time they want. You got to remember that everything in the workplace belongs to the employer, and they can use it for whatever they want. So if there's a hearing about your conduct in the workplace, or if there's something that's been stolen, they can use any of the digital records and any of the cameras. They don't have the right to look in the bathrooms or change rooms or something like that, because there you have a right to privacy. But if you're on a workplace device, your employer can use it. So it's really, really important for people to remember, let's say you're hunting for a job, don't do it from your company email address. You know, use a private email address, and you know, because your company is allowed to use anything that you do on their premises or on their devices when it's related to work. They're allowed to use it for their purposes.
So what you're basically saying is, as soon as you step onto the company's property, you are essentially giving up your right to privacy to a certain extent.
To a certain extent. Obviously, if you went to the bathroom or if you're in the change room, you know, I was discussing it with the ladies who do makeup over here. Obviously, they can't put cameras in the makeup room because people change in there. So you've got, of course, you do have rights to privacy, but if you're doing work and you're within the course and scope of your work, your right to privacy is very much more limited.
So there are limitations. We're chatting with Eitan Stern, Director at Legalese, resident sort of legal experts. We're asking, so now what when it comes to workplace surveillance? Do you have any questions to do with it? Let us know on our Facebook page, Expresso Morning Show SABC3. It's an interesting conversation that must go on because people often wonder, right?
And we'd love to engage with you as well. If you take a look at our Expresso Morning Show SABC3 Facebook page, we've also asked you the question. Maybe are you in a situation at work where you feel the surveillance is perhaps unwarranted, perhaps illegal? How do you feel about your boss having access to you as a person? I guess 24/7 would be if you were an overtime worker. So we're talking about surveillance at the workplace. How do you feel about that? Let us know, engage with us. We'd love to read some of your comments. We'll be back with Eitan Stern very shortly.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to it. It is your feel-good breakfast show. It's Expresso live right here on SABC3. We've asked you the question on social media. Would you be comfortable knowing your boss is watching you 24/7 with camera surveillance? Do you have this kind of experience, this kind of security setup in your office already? We received some pretty interesting comments that have come through. Here's the first one from Prosper. DJ Docs Sabata, who says, "Shoo, my workplace is like Tyler Perry's studio. Cameras everywhere. That guy even saw someone stealing when he was on holiday in France. I can't."
That's why, baby. That's
There's
why.
the first one. Luann Dupree says, when I worked at a pre-primary school, there were cameras in each class the whole day.
Okay.
We as teachers became used to it, and that's why the school is one of the best in South Africa,
Yeah,
because they're being
Oh,
watched.
where kids are involved.
You gotta
Another
watch.
one.
You gotta watch, people. Here's one from Antoinette Elon Willemse. Says, "Morning, guys. Yes, I would. In case something happens or someone walks in and steals something, and then you can trace all cameras to catch the person. Also, if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? I love it. It's like I'm in a movie. So smile. You're on camera." That's Antoinette Willemse.
I'm glad people have a sense of humor about all of this, man.
That's a pretty good attitude.
Yeah, man, you've got to do it. Look, the reality is the cameras are there, and as you've stipulated, you're allowed to have the cameras there.
Sure.
You know, if while the boss is away in France, people are stealing,
holiday.
that kind of reinforces why we need the cameras there. But let's flip the script just a little bit here. As an employee, a fellow employee, can I surveil? Because we know that things can happen.
Sure.
You might be subject to abuse, to bullying. You might be aware of sexual abuse, harassment. Where do we sit in the legal framework with ourselves coming in and recording stuff in the office?
So it's a tricky question with no exact answer. What you got to know is that, what you got to remember is that a workplace often is going to have confidential information. So if you are going and recording things in the workplace, you might be recording company confidential information, and that can be a crime and a problem in and of itself. So it's always going to be a bit dodgy or risky in order to record things in the workplace. That being said, if you are part of a conversation or if you feel like you need evidence about a crime, then you could potentially record it. It gets very complex in terms of using that evidence in a court case or a tribunal, so it's hard to give an exact
What has to
answer
stand
there.
up, just adding on
Sure.
to that, to be able to, if you've got video footage of
Sure.
something like that happening, what is the context of that to make it stand up in court?
It's too complex to answer in one right
In
now.
one day.
It's the laws of evidence are deep and complex, and you have to balance the people's right to privacy against our right to gather evidence. So it's too complex to answer. But so it's always going to be problematic. What I can say is, if you do see sexual harassment in the workplace, your first thing you should be doing is reporting it to management. And if it is your manager or boss that's doing the sexual harassment, then you got to go to the CCMA rather than trying to become a
sleuth or
yes,
a
a private eye
policeman
yourself.
So would an employee be able to use what they've recorded of surveillance, for example, for personal use? So, for example, if I played, let's say, a prank on Graham over here, which happens.
Which does happen. These sorts of things happen
They
a lot
do
on
happen
our
a lot
set.
on our set. Would I be able to pull that footage and use it for my own personal social media, for example?
Okay, so I mean, you could, but you might get sued or fired. So,
Okay, all right, okay, we don't want...
I feel like you set him up and you slapped him
But
down.
it really kind of depends on the workplace. I imagine here around you guys, it's about more of an informal workplace, and it's all about, you know, what's on camera. But you got to remember, if you put something on social media and your boss, if the person is offended and unhappy with it, they could take action against you. And if your boss is unhappy with you putting things around the workplace or you playing pranks at work, and if they see that, you could get in trouble. So, you know, in theory, I guess you could, but there can always be consequences.
Repercussions.
Yeah.
Let me kind of bolt on another thing, because this feels really dodgy. But if a person owns the rights to that footage, can they use it for their own personal use? So, for instance, if they're seeing things that interest them, something that's funny, that they want to keep that video, maybe a particular, you know, employee's looking rather attractive that particular day, where do they stand on what they can use that footage for? If they own the cameras, own the building, own the
Sure.
workspace?
So in general, that's going to be a very, very bad idea. If you're showing footage of people that you think are attractive, that's probably going to be sexual harassment in the workplace. and if you are using the data that you gather at your workplace for your personal use, you're probably going to be breaching data privacy laws. So in general, surveying people is a very serious thing and it has to be treated seriously. If an employer is going to be surveying its staff, then they're going to make sure they're doing it for security and in a reasonable way. And if they're doing it just to gather footage for their social media, then it's probably going to be trouble.
That being said, I mean, do we have any way of checking something like that? Do you have the right to say, I'd like to know what this footage is being used for and how it's being used? Is that something
that you can do? I'm going to have to go back to my law professors to find out that one. That's a interesting question. I don't know the answer to it.
It's taken us about 3 years, but I think I finally might have stumped you, bro. I think I might have done it.
Well, hopefully we've equipped you this morning with the understanding of how certain surveillance operates in the workplace, as well as
business.
Yeah, serious business all the time, but also how to legally record within your premises if you are an employer. And hopefully this has helped you lots. We'd like to hear about your stories as well. Still on our Facebook page, Expresso Morning Show, SABC3. Some funny ones coming through there. Keep them coming.